information we have to share about that.
Good evening, everybody. We're now going to begin a remote meeting through the use of video communication. It's important that we continue to respect the privacy and confidentiality of the members of our school community, including our teachers and staff and our students and families. By participating in this remote meeting today, you agree that you will not save, record, share, or post this session or any photos from this session. I also agree that I'm not going to save, record, or share, or post the session or any photos from this session. This meeting is being recorded by North Brookfield LPAC. If you do not agree to these rules, please disconnect from the session now. Thank you.
Okay, so we do know there's a lot of interest in the discussion about the mascot, so we're going to move the agenda around a little bit. But to start off with, we want to recognize our art teacher, Luis Martinez, was awarded the Middle Level Art Educator of the Year by, which is the group?
So it would be the Massachusetts
there we go.
Art Educator Association. He was nominated. It can be nominated by anyone. And once he was nominated, he was then asked to fill out all sorts of paperwork and almost an application of sorts. And Lewis ended up winning for the middle level. There was a high school teacher selected and an elementary art teacher selected. Lewis happens to teach pre-K to 12 here in our district, but he was selected as the middle school art teacher of the year in Massachusetts by the Massachusetts Art Educator Association. Congratulations to Lewis.
Yeah, it's very exciting and very happy that he is here. So just, I think we'll approve the minutes before we talk to the Student Advisory Council. So does anyone have any comments on the minutes from October 19th?
What I'm going to do is I'm going to unmute the.
Okay. Debbie and Elizabeth. Yeah.
Debbie and Elizabeth.
Okay. That would be good.
I'm unmuted.
There you go.
Did either Debbie or Elizabeth have any comments on the minutes?
No, other than to say I'm going to abstain because I was not at that meeting.
Okay, so we just need a motion to approve the minutes.
I move to approve the minutes for October 19th, 2020.
I second the motion.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
And Debbie is abstaining, but all in favor? And I neglected to say that Ruth is actually not going to be able to make the meeting tonight, so she's not here.
Passes 3-4, 0 against, and 1 abstention.
Yep. So the student advisory update is Megan on tonight?
I gotta find her. Sorry.
Sorry, there's a lot of people on, so he's got to find her.
Find her face. I'm gonna mute myself again. Rich.
I don't see Megan either.
Okay.
Megan, raise your hand if you're here and you're just under another name. No one is raising their hand, so usually they jump to the top on that. So Megan wasn't able to make it today.
Okay. All right. Well, then what we're going to do then is that we're going to move the discussion about the mascot up to this point here. Well, actually, I should say we don't have any correspondence. And we do have a presentation. So we have invited a group to speak before we have our public that registered to speak. And sorry, I have a lot of paper here and I'm trying to find the name of this group here. I'm sorry. They sorry. A lot of paperwork. I apologize. We're getting there.
Get on mute one of them.
This one. Yeah, okay. So we invited a group from the Mascot Coalition Steering Committee. And the Laurel Davis Delano and Rhonda Anderson are they the chair people? So we'll start with Ms. Davis Delano is here. If we can
Yep.
start with her.
Hi, Laurel, can you hear us?
Yes, but I'm not presenting. I just helped organize it. I'm not a native, I'm not a native person.
Sure. Can you just give me a real quick description, or could Rhonda give a real quick description of your group just to let people know?
Rhonda, do you want to do that? No, okay. We are the steering committee. There's 8 of us that are part of the steering committee of the Massachusetts Mascot Coalition. And we've brought or helped to organize 8 native speakers for tonight. And we sent their names and their titles and an order. And
Yep.
hopefully this will, you'll hear some different ideas.
All right. So yes, so the first woman we have on the list, her name is Melissa Harding Ferretti, and I apologize if I've mispronounced her name. She is the chair lady, president of the Herring Pond Wampanoag Tribe of Plymouth, Massachusetts.
And I'm going to ask Melissa if she is listed as Herring Pond Wampanoag and hit ask to unmute. I assume she is.
Yes, correct. Herring Pond Wampanoag.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Melissa. Thanks for being here.
Okay, so I'm just going to start with my introduction first. And Wani Nakan, Natasuwis, Melissa Ferretti, New Tomas, Sikwana Makwapakwit, Ha Natai Patuxid. What I said to you in my language is good evening. My name is Melissa Ferretti. I am from the Herring Pond Wampanoag Tribe of Plymouth. I do have my speech up in front of me, but I just wanted to thank North Brookfield for having this conversation, and Laurel and Rhonda and the rest of the speakers that are here tonight, and my cousins and brothers and sisters. I'm just always really honored to be here. So I'm a Herring Pond mother, grandmother. I was raised in Cedarville, and it's a small village in the town of Plymouth, by an elder of my tribe. And I have lived on my homelands all my life. We know all too well there's little knowledge of the actual history and contemporary existence of tribal communities in this region. I know about the racism faced by my ancestors, my tribal community, and the members of my family and myself growing up in the town of Plymouth. The fact that racist ideas about Native peoples in Massachusetts are deeply ingrained and are reflected in sports teams' mascots should not have to be explained in 2020, especially since Native activists and educators have worked so hard and for so long to educate Americans about this. But here we are. I don't know how many we've done this year, and it's been great, but trying to educate government officials and educators like yourself about the blatant and destructive racism of these images and of sports teams' mascots. Sorry about that. In my tenure as tribal chairwoman, I've worked really hard to educate the public, non-natives and natives alike, about the Herring Pond Wampanoag tribe and its rich, well-documented history in the town of Plymouth, born and in the Commonwealth. As a tribal nation located at the ground zero of colonization, I know well Indigenous people in New England are often overlooked or ignored. As a tribe whose ancestral homelands, along with the forest, fish, and other wildlife in the region, was used by the Pilgrims to serve their interests as colonists, we know that we in our history as a tribe and other tribes in the Commonwealth are directly connected to the ongoing struggles of many Native communities in North America. There is a long history of erasing, ignoring, trying to silence Native people. This is part of the racism faced by tribal citizens in New England. The racism that says that we don't exist or that we have no voice in matters that directly affect our lives and our rights, like mascots. Native peoples throughout the United States have fought for decades to bring an end to mascots. First and foremost, such symbols of imagery are deeply offensive, racist, and harmful to the well-being of Indigenous people, and especially our youth. I can remember growing up and seeing these images as a small child and feeling a sense of embarrassment and sort of not really understanding why our Indigenous people would be a caricature. So there are no sports teams, mascots that do honor to our tribal identity and history. The truth is we often feel invisible and dismissed. We're constantly having to validate our existence, explain who we are and where we're from, something that could have been explained in a classroom if only Native American education and Indigenous studies were considered a necessary part of the curriculum. Mascots do not make Euro-American sports fans want to go to the library to read the work of Native authors or to learn about Native history or the theft of Native homelands or the enslavement of Native people in colonial New England, or learn about the racism and genocidal impacts of US Indian policy. They do none of these. And promoting the notion that it is okay and just harmless fun to reduce Indigenous peoples to stereotyped images or characters is just preposterous, really. These images have been part of the Euro-American mindset for over 400 years. And its justifications of violence and racism directed specifically at Native and Indigenous peoples. Sports teams' mascots are part of the colonial project of erasing our identities, silencing us, and our history. They suggest that colonization of Native peoples in the region is inevitable and necessary. But we have never been silent, as you can see with this wonderful panel that you're going to hear tonight. We continue to resist colonization and racism that is aimed at Native peoples. Like tribal nations throughout the United States, we are very proud of the work that we have done as a resilient nation. So in closing, I would like to just share a quick quote by Crystal Echo Hawk. She is a Pawnee and director of a Native advocacy organization called Illuminative. So she says, the systematic erasure of Native peoples from modern society has led to the fact that 78% of Americans know little to nothing about Native Americans. 72% rarely encounter information about Native Americans, Native people. 66% of Americans don't think that Native people face discrimination. The limited exposure Americans have to Native peoples is rife with harmful stereotypes and representations that include those perpetuated by Native American sports mascots, teams, names, and racist fan traditions. So Katapatash, thank you for listening to me. My apologies to my Indigenous panel, my other Native people here. They've heard me say this before, but that speech, I really did write that from the heart. And I think that much of it is just educating the people who are in the room. And thank you for sharing your space with us this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. I forgot to mention that this panel was pulled together really quickly. Mr. Lind and I had a meeting with Laurel and Rhonda and last week, actually. So we really appreciate you taking the time in such short notice. So next on the list is, and again, I'm gonna hopefully pronounce your name right, Fairies Strong Medicine Gray from the Massachusetts Tribe of Ponkapaug, Sagamore, War Chief / tribal historian. So welcome.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'd like to thank the committee for creating this forum for us to talk about this important issue. I'd like to thank my fellow panelists for taking the time out of their lives, and to all of your residents that have joined this meeting also to weigh in, to listen to this very important issue. My name is Farius Gray. I am the Sagamore, which is the war chief of the Massachusetts tribe at Ponkapaug. What I do is I put in some context so people can understand why we indigenous feel it's wrong to use for schools, to use indigenous mascots. I speak for the Massachusetts tribe. I don't speak, the other tribes speak for themselves. They're representative tonight. So in the early 1600s, even before that, the late 1500s, the Massachusetts tribe was trading with the French and later on the English. For nearly 100 years, we were trading with these two countries who would visit our shores. And then in the beginning of the 1600s, plagues swept through all of our territories. Epidemic, if you will. And we can kind of relate to that on a smaller scale from wearing the mask now and from COVID. But if you picture it, if you imagine it, for the indigenous people in the 1600s, what happened? It was a terrible plague that swept through all of our communities, killed 90% of our people. Whole towns lay dead. And after the plagues, the English here in New England decided they were going to settle after we were decimated by plagues. And so they just basically just came here and just settled where they wanted. The vast villages were gone. There was no one there. So they just basically just moved into towns that were already established or villages that were already established. The planting fields were already established. And so once they came here and settled here, they systematically pushed back all of our peoples further and further inland, isolated us to praying towns. All of this is well documented. Now, in these praying towns, we were forced to assimilate to Christianity, forced to adopt this colonial way of life, colonial clothes, and even our own language. Everything was forbidden. Our spirituality was forbidden. Basically, we were held prisoner in our own home. And so if you fast forward to where we are today, you have the indigenous people here in the Commonwealth, and quite frankly, the entire United States, all assimilated into this colonial way of thinking. All of us are assimilated. And then when you look up and you see a high school with our mascot on it, you think to yourself, am I a trophy? Is that what we are? Are we trophies? You conquered the savage, and now you're a trophy. And some people think we're honored, we should be honored, or they're honoring us. We are not honored. You are not honoring us. That is no way to honor a person, to use them as a mascot. We use animals as mascots, fictional characters as mascots, not human beings who are still here. And we know this was not done intentionally. We truly believe that you thought you were honoring us, but you are not honoring us. We are not honored. We are not a trophy. We are a people, living, breathing people with feelings. Our children grow up and see this. We all grew up and had to deal with this. I personally went to high school with the mascot, indigenous mascot. Had to sit through pep rallies where my friends were acting like they were indigenous. I couldn't hide enough couldn't hide how I felt, how it made me feel. And then when I had children, it seemed that they had the same experience I had. And so we're here today to stop it. It has to stop. It should stop. There is no other race that has to deal with this. It's only indigenous people here in this country that has to deal with this. Only us. You have no other races on as mascots, acting like you're this people. Headdresses, face paint, conquer the savages, defeat the savages. It's insane if you think about it that we even have to have this conversation to inform people that it's not acceptable to have us as your mascot. It's not acceptable. It's harmful to all of us. It's harmful to me. It's harmful to my children. It's harmful to your children. They're growing up thinking it's okay to do this to a people, but it's not okay. And we truly don't believe that this is done on purpose. And we do understand how some people are attached to their mascots because that's part of their memory. But it has to stop and it has to change. At what cost are we going to keep these indigenous mascots? And your mascot is not gross. It's not like some that are just totally cartoonish. It's not accurate anyway. We didn't wear headdresses here. And we are not Indians. Indians are from India. That was a mistake made by the early colonists. Well, not even the colonists, the early explorers who thought they were in India. We are not Indians. And so it just keeps the mistakes going. It's just, I made a mistake, so I'm not going to fix it. So I'm just going to keep it going and going and going. And it has to stop. And this committee has the power to stop it. And we truly ask you stop it because it's harmful to all of us. So I'd like to thank everyone once again for taking the time out of your lives to come and listen to us and to think about what all of us are telling you. So thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Gray. And next we have Rhonda Anderson and Inupiaq Athabaskan, I hope I said that right, Western Massachusetts Commissioner on Indian Affairs and founder and co-director of the OK2 Cultural Center. Hopefully I got that right, Rhonda.
It's okay. It's Inupiaq and Okateo. Okay, so
Okay.
Pagalagisi, Inupiaq Shinaga Olak, Tanuk Shinaga Rhonda Anderson, Pangmakpak Anu Urango Korenami, Shavaktunga Western Massachusetts Commissioner on Indian Affairs me. Koyanak Nalag Nagipsi, North Brookfield Mute. Thank you for listening, and thank you to North Brookfield School Committee and community. I'm speaking from Sakoki, Abenaki, and Pecumtuck traditional homelands in Coleraine, Massachusetts, and I am Inupiaq Athabaskan, and I have lived in Western Massachusetts for most of my life. I do maintain connections to both the Native community here and in Alaska, but I am a longtime activist on removing Native mascots, as well as an alum and mother of a child in a district with a mascot, Warriors specifically. My child does not go to the local high school as I do not want her to have the same issues with a Native mascot that I did. Instead, I have proudly cheered her, my daughter, and our friends on as aardvarks and as an otter. So, particularly in today's climate of acknowledging racism, people must understand that the oppressions and marginalizations of any racial group are never acceptable. We should not overlook the racism in our children's educational systems via mascots. And like Ferries said, we are the only race used for mascots, right alongside animals, chosen professions like cowboys and patriots, races that are not oppressed minorities, such as Vikings, and imaginary beings like leprechauns. Native Americans are the last accepted vestige of overt racism in this country, and I would even say celebrated racism. If we strive to do anti-racist work, we must do the work to dismantle systemic and institutional racism. Through these stereotypical representations, like the mascot that you have, it erases the identity of Native people. It generates stereotypes about what a Native person looks like and portrays us as people in the past. And such representation in educational settings leads to more widespread and acceptable stereotyping and biases. Native students in schools with harmful mascots feel unsafe and unwelcome, which is a civil rights violation. Civil rights are not up for a popular vote. The use of these mascots in educational settings greenlights more widespread community stereotyping, making it acceptable and okay to do. Most portrayals of Native mascots are warlike, aggressive, and violent. And as evidenced by my local newspaper headlines here in Western Massachusetts, they read, "Indians invade and town braces for Indian attack," as well as the outright cultural appropriation by wearing stereotypical headdresses to the games. These stereotypes and violent portrayals create biases that dramatically affect our outcomes. We have the highest rates of murder, sexual assault, suicide, incarceration, and death from police brutality. It can be hard to visualize a future with yourself in it when facing erasure and violence. And as a Native woman, I have found it personally dangerous to be speaking up for change, as other Native activists and I have been subject to verbal harassment and threats of rape, violence, and death. It is essential to learn how the rise of mascots began when Native children were removed from their homes and placed in boarding schools in a policy of intentional cultural genocide. During this time, non-Natives struggled to find a common identity in the melting pot country, and they chose to appropriate Native images to honor the warrior and the fallen savage, giving the nod to manifest destiny. As a point of the process going forward, you must work in creating curriculum, education, and reciprocal lasting relationships with the local tribes. These questions regarding the use of mascots will have answers that will become apparent once the education and the relationships begin. The National Congress of American Indians recently gave a letter of support to the Massachusetts bill to remove mascots from high schools. Over 145 tribal, government, educational, professional, civil rights, and religious organizations in the United States have recognized the negative health impacts of Native American mascots and called for the elimination of or restrictions on Native American mascots. In Massachusetts, this includes the Chappaquiddick tribe of Wampanoag Nation, the Herring Pond Wampanoag tribe, Mashpee Wampanoag tribe, Massachusetts tribe at Ponkapog, and Nipmuc Nation. Organizations in Massachusetts include Cultural Survival, Massachusetts Center for Native American Awareness, Massachusetts Commission on Indian Affairs, Massachusetts Teachers Association, National Association of Social Workers, New England Area Conference of the NAACP, North American Indian Center of Boston, Progressive Massachusetts, United American Indians of New England, the Upstander Project, and UU Mass Action. In addition to the NCAI, national organizations include National Education Association, U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, the American Psychological Association, American Anthropological Association, American Sociological Association, and the National Collegiate Athletic Association. The school committee and the community might find that information overwhelming, but the school committee must not ignore the studies when making educational decisions for our children. Finally, removing Native mascots will not erase us. Removing mascots will not remove our history. Native Americans, yes, are generally invisible in mainstream society, yes. But we need accurate, diverse, historical, and contemporary representations in mainstream United States, not harmful stereotypes like Native mascots. So I humbly ask that you vote to replace the Indian name and mascot and image and be on the right side of history. You'll not be losing your identity. You'll not be losing your memories. Instead, you'll gain community spirit and cooperation, coming together to create a new mascot and name. A new mascot and name that everyone can truly be proud to stand behind. Because remember, we're always going to be proud of our children, even if they are aardvarks and otters. So Koyana to North Brookfield School Committee for having us tonight. It is crucial to center and listen to Native voices. Thank you all very much for listening. That's all.
Thank you. Next we have Shauna Newcomb, who is Mashpee Wampanoag, and she's also a teacher at Hanover Middle School and on the anti-bias committee. Hi, Shauna.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. And thank you to all of the other Indigenous speakers who are again here tonight. Here we are again. It is so nice, I do want to just mention, to see all of you here all the time. Another meeting where we have to think about how we are going to convince this district of why we are important, why our voices matter. And it's tiring, it's exhausting, and you don't think you would have to ever do this in 2020, but here we are, and seeing you all here tonight, it gives me the energy to do it again. So thank you. And for everybody else, non-Indigenous people who are here supporting, you are also helping to light that fire and continue this. So I appreciate you for being here and for listening. What I would like to start by saying is I am a teacher. I'm a 6th grade science and social studies teacher at the Hanover Middle School in Hanover, Massachusetts, which just voted about 2-3 months ago to retire its Indian mascot with also the war bonnet or the headdress, which you are mostly familiar with as the term. And that was their mascot in Hanover for decades, I believe about 60 years. And here I am as a new teacher, just 2 years in, not having professional teacher status, and the only Native American in the entire district who felt the need to speak on this matter. And so I risked it all, thinking that perhaps my job could be in jeopardy. Do I do this? And so I decided to be a leader, because that's what my job is as a teacher, is to be. So I wanted to show my students, I wanted to show my family, and I wanted to show other Indigenous people that now is the time that we can step up, and so I'm going to do my part. And so I want you guys tonight here to think about that and to do the same, because we know that there's legislation that's being passed to potentially make it mandatory to get rid of all mascots, all Native American mascots. But why do we have to wait for that? Be proactive. You are the leaders. We are the leaders. Our kids are looking up to us. So we have the decision right now. Why would we be forced? We should choose. Just think of the message that sends to our students, to our kids, if we are choosing to be on the right side of history tonight. So that's what I want you to remember. But let's just start by saying, you've already heard the term Indian, it's not actually accurate, right? So Christopher Columbus, back in 1492, he mistakenly, like we've heard previously tonight, he found a shortcut, well, he thought, to India. So then he went back to King Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain, who funded his trip and said that, oh, I met these people called Indians. And so from that point on, we were just coined as Indians. But Indians are actually descendants from India. And if you ask any Native American, we would prefer to be called Indigenous, Native American, or by our tribe, right? So I'm Mashpee Wampanoag. I'm not Indian. What is that? That is a descendant from India. So we have to be factual, especially as leaders, as adults. Like, these are the decisions that we can make and teach our kids. And the term Indian, just in general, is a reminder of colonization and the assimilation Native Americans were forced to accept. So just keep that in mind. Not only is the term Indian dishonorable, but the commonly used headdress, as seen in the North Brookfield mascot, is also just as shameful. These headdresses or war bonnets are actually sacred in Native American culture. And I feel like I have to teach people a lot about this. And I didn't realize that it's not known. But each feather, it has to be earned. You don't just wear it on a t-shirt. You earn each feather by an act of bravery. It's not something that you should just put on a helmet and that's, you earned it. You didn't earn it. It's dishonorable and it's disrespectful to Native American people. So I don't think I need to continue talking about that. And then the whole idea of this Indian portrayal of war bonnet wearing people just perpetuates this stereotype that that's what all Native Americans look like. So this is a true story. Every single year, on the first few days of school, I get to explain to students, all about my background, get to know your teacher. And it's really one of my favorite parts until I have to tell them that I am Native American, because I know what their expression already is going to be. Just blank faces. They have no idea what I'm talking about. They look at me like I just said some other language. And I have to remind them, Native Americans, the people who were indigenous to this area before colonization, and they're still not understanding. And I have to say, the Disney movie Pocahontas, that's the only way that they can make any sort of correlation between me and Native Americans, because I'm not wearing the feathers on my head. I'm not wearing the traditional garb that Native Americans once wore, that our ancestors wore. They don't know that Native Americans still exist. And just like the Pilgrims have evolved, right? Their clothing has changed over time. So have Native Americans. So we're not all hunter-gatherers still today. Like we have changed over time, and people have just chosen to forget about us. And you are choosing to continue that tradition by continuing to institute your mascot. And I do just want to point out that the North Brookfield's mission statement, which was very similar to Hanover's mission statement as well, it says that you as a community provide or hope to provide students with opportunities to grow academically, socially, emotionally, and physically, with the goal of producing successful, productive citizens and future leaders. Well, how are you supposed to cultivate that when Native American students who may be in your district are feeling insecure, or are feeling that they're being ridiculed or made a mascot? How are they supposed to grow into successful humans if they feel like they are less than? Native Americans have a higher suicide rate than any other race in this country. And Native American males in high school have an 8 times higher suicide rate than any other. Now, I'm not saying that Indian mascots are the reason for that, but it certainly does not help the case. And we can choose tonight to change that. And so remember to be the leaders of tomorrow, because the power right now is in your hands, and it's a very simple decision if you ask most people. Thank you again for having me tonight. And if anybody wants to continue the conversation, feel free to send me an email, snewcomb@hanoverschools.org. Thank you.
Thanks, Shauna. Next is Anthony Meltingtallow. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce your native name there. He's a visual artist, public speaker, Indigenous social justice advocate, and you are from the Blackfoot Nation of, again, I apologize, Siksika, Alberta, Canada, and you've been living in Western Mass since 2005.
Hello, everybody. Okinapi, Nistu, Botanis. I'm a resident of Western Massachusetts, and I've been invited to speak on a number of issues relevant to Indigenous people, historically and contemporarily. I've sat on a number of panels with Rhonda Anderson and a number of other Indigenous people that you have listened to so far this evening concerning the question of mascots. And I speak from a personal perspective as an Indigenous person who's been displaced, who's had to live at the effect of many of these issues that we brought to people, particularly Massachusetts, attention concerning the harmful effects of the stereotypes that are engendered by the use of mascots, especially when it comes to teaching our next generation of students, our children. People ask me, why do you think the mascot issue is so important? It's because we're teaching the next generation, we're passing down our values. And unfortunately, when it comes to the mascot issue, we're passing down information and values that are not true, and they've ended up, having a detrimental impact upon Indigenous people's lives. I come from a generation that was the first generation not to have to attend the residential school system in Canada. The last one closed in Western Canada in the province of Saskatchewan at Gordon Hill in 1996. And that institution was set up in Canada to take away our culture, to assimilate us, and to kill the Indian and the child. And while I'd never set foot inside a residential school system, I lived my life at the effect of those harmful legacies. And growing up, we grew up in the city of Calgary, in Western Canada and Southern Alberta. And during my years of going to public schools, I never saw any positive representation of myself, of my people. And that was the purpose of assimilation, was to take our culture, our language, our heritage, our stories, our knowledge of living on the land, and it removed all our kinship ties with all our fellow nations that surrounded us. And they branded us as warlike people. We are not warlike people. We were the Blackfoot. My people were known for being diplomats, for negotiators, for establishing kinships. They established treaties, and they established ways of living peacefully with each other, trading. This myth of the savage warrior, it's false. The headdress that adorns the mascot of North Brookfield, we were not even, as Northern Plains Indigenous people, we had our own eagle feather headdresses. And those were only granted, there were certain protocols and a lived history that was reflected in being gifted an eagle feather headdress. The Blackfoot eagle feather headdress stood straight up, a circle of eagle feathers above the head. In 1877, when Sitting Bull defeated the 7th Cavalry, the Lakota, along with several allied nations, defeated General Custer on the battlefield, knew that he was going to be persecuted, and the full weight of the US Army brought down upon his people, took a band of people, and they fled to Canada. And some of them took refuge amongst the Blackfeet, the Blackfoot. And Sitting Bull named one of his sons after our chief, Chief Crowfoot, in honor of taking him in. And another gift that he gave the Blackfoot people was the thunder drum of the Lakota. And along with the thunder drum came certain songs and ceremonies and protocol that went with that thunder drum, and as well as the Sioux Lakota honor of the backward facing eagle feather headdress. He gifted that to Crowfoot, and along with those protocols that go with gifting a headdress. So even amongst my people, it's not something that you just assume just because you're in a position of respect. That alone doesn't grant you the use or the gifting of the headdress, the honor to wear it. So it's a very obvious misappropriation of a high honor and a rare honor to be given, that even as Indigenous people, we can't just assume that honor upon ourselves. And that goes back to the strength of these communities. And I thank the school board for giving us this opportunity to have some of our stories shared and to be part of some of the last words from some of the first peoples that are here. My personal experience, I never grew up seeing a positive representation in my entire childhood into my youth of indigeneity. Growing up in the city, we were referred to as urban Indians. What that meant was on the nightly news, we were depicted as bums, skid row, on welfare, drunks, panhandlers, no good, or in jail, or dead. For example, up until the 1990s, there were no national representations of positive news stories about Indigenous people. Only in 1991 was there did myself and my younger brother find any positive representation of ourselves in the media. And it came from a half-hour news magazine produced by Indigenous people for Indigenous people. But the only way we could access that was to stay up till 3 a.m. on a school night and listen to stories of jewelers, beaters, people who were fighting in the courts for their rights. My little brother, he died on the streets of Calgary in 2012, never having any real positive reflection of himself. No one listened to him. He was according to society, he was a natural outcome of what an Indigenous person's life should be. Assimilated, another brown face, or dead. There was no autopsy conducted for him. Nothing was in the paper. He was just another dead Indian. My brother was murdered in 2015 in Vancouver, and it was the same story again. My little nephew passed away the same way my little brother did in July. So I see these legacies rippling through the generations. And they are these young people that had promise, bright, talented, beautiful, thoughtful, generous people. And there was no place for them in this world. It was either give up, get with the program, or what? I speak on behalf of them because they can no longer speak anymore for themselves. These things have real life consequences. And these are messages we're sending to the next generation. It's Native American Heritage Month here in the United States. It's 2020. It's time to do right by the next generations. We can, we should. We're being asked to. And I'm glad that you're here with your ears open and your hearts open. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anthony. Next is Penny Gamble Williams from the Chappaquiddick tribe of the Wampanoag Nation, spiritual leader and tribal council member.
I guess I was muted. Sorry about that.
Oh,
My
no
name
worries.
is Penny Gamble Williams here, and I am the spiritual elder of the Chappaquiddick tribe of the Wampanoag Nation. And our land, of course, is Chappaquiddick Island. I'm a mother, a grandmother, a great-grandmother. And I've seen quite a bit. And to have this conversation in 2020, or in the 21st century, is very sad to me, but it's necessary. I want to, first of all, talk about I work with young people. My husband and I work with young people. I'm a visual artist and an art instructor and a cultural presenter. And I talk to young people about the Wampanoag and many other aspects of history. And most of the time, a lot of young people know nothing about Native people. And I have talked to them about mascots and how they feel about mascots. And most of them have no point of reference because this is what they know. This is what they hear, and they're wrapped up in the game and have never really thought about the harm that mascots do, not only to Indigenous youth and Indigenous people, but for themselves. I want to talk about my own personal history. Born in the late 40s, when I was in school, elementary school, which I like to say many moons ago, I had spent the summer, as I normally did, with my relatives who live on the Cape, on Martha's Vineyard Island, and New Bedford, and some relatives who lived in Narragansett. And after participating in the various activities, especially for youth during that time, my first day back to school, the teacher said, write about what you did, boys and girls. And so I did. And I was very shy. I didn't really like to, stand out or do anything like that. And so I stood proudly and I read what I had done that summer. And the reaction from my fellow students was really positive, and I felt really good. The teacher walked over to me and put her hand firmly on my shoulder and said, it is not nice to make up stories like that. You know, all the New England Indians are dead. And that had quite an impact on me, even during that particular time. So I went home and I told my mother, and my mother admonished me saying, never let anybody tell you who you are. Next day, my mother accompanied me to school and got a few things straight with the principal and eventually the teacher. Things haven't changed that much in many ways. There are a lot of classrooms who have Native children in the classrooms, and a lot of teachers may not be aware. You know, what does a Native person look like? Well, we come in various shades and textures and everything. And so a lot of times when the history is ignored and no one is really understanding or relating or thinking about anything that's happening with Native people, that's a problem. And so when you combine that with racist mascots, then it's a very serious problem. My prayer is that you will make good decisions and remove these mascots for the sake of the young people and for the sake of all people. The more we know, the more we learn about one another, especially the history of this country, this continent, the better off we will all be. So I just want to thank you for allowing me to speak. So many powerful expressions of this history and the knowledge of the panels have been expressed. And it's an honor to be here. Thank you again. Katabatash.
Thank you, Penny. Next, we have Jamie Morrison from UMass Boston, Director of Urban Scholars, men's basketball coach, Native American student liaison, Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians.
Oh, thank you for, like my contemporaries and peers said, thank you for having us here tonight. I'll be brief. I think a lot of our group has kind of, already shared a lot. But I've have a sort of unique perspective as I like a couple of others on the panel. Went to a school that in Winchester that had a mascot, and I've been in athletics, coaching as a career for over 15 years at the collegiate level, mostly here in Massachusetts, at least the last 11. 7 of which were up on Route 2, what is now MCLA, formerly North Adams State, and the Mohawks. And so I've had a unique perspective to be involved in athletics and dealing with, as a student athlete myself, my friends and peers, and now they've, like me, they've gotten older and are alums and parents, and there's a lot of sort of different aspects that come in, like Faries and like Rhonda, and probably everybody else that went to a high school or a school that had a Native mascot. I too was subjected to the pep rallies, and the non-Native students dressing up inappropriately, inaccurately, and doing things that they learned either on TV or through other stereotypes that they grew to be acceptable from their parents, from students and alumni and teachers that came before them. And so it was a learned behavior and a culture of insensitivity that just keeps being taught from one generation to the next. In Massachusetts specifically, like I said, I've coached and played, for over 15 years, and almost exclusively, these things have occurred, in towns or communities that primarily had very few or no voices of color, and certainly indigenous voices. These communities largely, have been, Anglo communities, whether it's the suburbs or the rural part of the state. And part of it, I think, it was either, maybe it was Shauna said, part of it is understood because, some folks just don't know. And you don't know what you don't know. And again, what's passed on to you as acceptable behavior as a young person, unless that behavior is corrected or it's pointed out, you just don't ever know that what I'm doing is wrong or hurtful. But nonetheless, ignorance doesn't make it right, and that doesn't make it any more acceptable. Again, I've been at many athletic contests, basketball, football, where crowds are often not controlled. And even if your community tries to do everything right, you can't control your opponents. You go on the road and you play someone, or the visiting town comes into your place, you can't control how they express themselves. And even though your intent, is as pure as it may be, ultimately you can't stop the harm from being done to the Native community, the Native youth that may be in your community, or maybe visitors to your community. You can't control that, and very little is done in terms of education. We have found that to be definitely the case. Most of the schools that have these types of mascots do very little to no education, whether it's the local history, the state or regional history. There's nothing that's provided to these students. Very few indigenous people, local indigenous people. As you see tonight, you have plenty of folks that are local, who have ties to their communities here, and very few of them are ever invited to these communities to come and share their history, to, you know, share how they live contemporary. You know, it's often, like in this case, you have a group, you know, whether it's Rhonda or Laurel, who kind of brings us together and sort of lets a lot of communities know, hey, we're out here if you need us or you want us to come in and talk. You know, and again, that just, it speaks to the lack of education that's being provided to the young people in your communities. And again, it's not unique to North Brookfield. You know, you're not being singled out. And it's great that you have us here tonight, and that you're looking at this issue and understand that, you know, maybe it is time to make a change. But, you know, it's very damaging. It's very upsetting. We have been sort of, you know, making the rounds here this summer, and it's been great that a lot of communities are finally sort of seeing the light and saying, you know, enough is enough. And there's always pushback within the community from some folks, and that's always to be expected. And that pushback can often be loud and boisterous, and we understand that. But you know, it's important to sort of stay the course. You know, when it comes to this issue, it is time. It is the 21st century. You know, it's long overdue. I think everybody, you know, on this committee that's been speaking, you know, feels like, you know, we're just tired, right? You can hear it in our voices tonight. You know, I've been on a few of these with our group, and you can hear it in our group tonight. Like, we're tired. We're tired of having these conversations and repeating ourselves. We're happy to do it, but it's we you know, we are tired, and you know, again, it's one more community where we hope that you make the right decision. And again, I can't remember who mentioned it, but I think it's also important that you sort of drive the train on this, and you have an opportunity to make this decision yourself and sort of provide a path forward and how you want to, you know, not just eradicate the mascot, but then how do you want to sort of build in some Indigenous education, you know, into your curriculum, and how do you sort of teach the right way kind of going forward. And while it's long overdue, it's a great opportunity for you and your community and your education system to sort of, you know, like I said, figure out how you want to carve a path forward to do the right thing and to teach about Indigenous history. And, you know, the goal is not, right, hey, get rid of the mascot, okay, and wipe your hands of all the Indigenous folks. It's okay, what do we do now to, you know, promote diversity, to continue to invite folks back in a different capacity, right? To learn about, maybe go visit their homeland, you know, visit their communities, find out how they're living, you know, and what you can do to help, you know, embrace that in your own community. So I think all my peers tonight did a great job of talking about their personal stories, and you don't need to hear one more from me. But I just think it's really important that you make this decision. You make this decision tonight. You don't drag it out, and then, you know, have a plan in terms of what comes next, and, you know, sort of being a leader in your community and in your area. And, you know, hopefully, if there are other schools or other places that are close by you, they'll see what you did and try to follow your lead. And very, very soon in the near future, we won't have to have any of these conversations, because all of these mascots will be retired. And you can have us all back and talk about something else. So again, I thank you for your time tonight. I appreciate you listening to all of us. And I know we have, you know, at least one more speaker. So just ask that, you know, you be patient and listen to what we all have to say, and take heed of that. But appreciate you having us here tonight.
Thanks a lot, Jamie, for speaking. Last, we have Brittany Wally, who is a Nipmuc and an anti-mascot representative.
Sure. Dr. Sowers, Brittany Wally. Hi, my name is Brittany Wally. And yes, I am Nipmuc. I am also my tribe's anti-mascot representative. And aside from that, I've spent a lot of my time in non-traditional educator roles. So, like many of us have already said, We are tired of educating people of this, but we are happy to do it because we're working towards something. We're working towards something better. So, because I knew that I would be speaking last, I wanted to paraphrase my normal speaking points because these faces are familiar to me and their stories and their facts are familiar to me, although they may be new to you. However, after I paraphrase some of the important salient points that I always speak about, I wanted to speak not so much about me, but actually more about you. And I wanted to share some histories that have futures. So some points. Firstly, using Indigenous peoples as mascots is dehumanizing. I have 2 points on this. Firstly, these mascots represent Native people. So Native voices are the ones that need to be considered. And Native voices have been calling for the removal of Native mascots for decades. So this is nothing new. It's not a new message for me. It's not a new message for you. Now, there are 5 tribal letters, I believe they were mentioned earlier tonight. They are found on the MA Indigenous Agenda website. One of those letters is from my tribe. The second thing is that there is empirical evidence. So not only are the voices of Native people calling for the removal of these mascots, but there is research that shows that Native mascots are not educationally sound. They have no place in a school. There are direct negative effects that affect Native people. And to quickly summarize some of the few things, the biggest one is that they lower Native people's self-esteem. That should stand on its own. But they also lower the ability of Native people when they perceive their community. It lowers how they view their community's abilities, especially in the future. That is a negative thing. We don't want that. I wouldn't want that for a community that wasn't Native either. There's also these indirect effects, and they speak to non-Native people, and they're pretty incriminating. One of them is that, of course, Native mascots help non-Native people build and solidify stereotypes about Native people. There's science on this. Another unfortunate point is that usually supporters of mascots already have these stereotypes. Now, a few other things that I'd like to paraphrase is, well, for brevity's sake, I want to add that Native mascots are a direct violation of the Massachusetts Interscholastic Athletic Association's taunting policy. You can see the clause about ethnicities. You can see the clause about cultures. I also wanted to echo one of the things mentioned earlier, that this is usually potentially a hostile climate. It's a hostile thing for Native people to enter into, and it is a strange day and age that I can speak to you all through Zoom from the comfort of my own home and know that my body, my person is safe. It'd be a lot more stressful if I had to come to you and go into your community and not know how my body is going to be treated, let alone my culture and my values. So, the last quick point before I share some history with you is that I want to quickly ask you to look inwardly and challenge yourselves to live up to the expectations that you set for yourselves. I quickly looked up the high school, and your vision statement states, North Brookfield Public School envisions a district where students are empowered to be equal collaborators in the development of their educational pathway. We recognize and honor the wide range of learning styles and interests of our students, and will provide them with the opportunities to achieve success in the manner that inspires a love and excitement of learning. Students will leave prepared to be successful in a dynamic 21st century society. So if the future is on your mind, Native people are alive today. We're not a thing of the past. We are also going to be in the future. And right now with your mascot, it's not going to be a possible goal for you to achieve with your students if you keep that mascot. So I encourage you to change it so we can move on to the future together. Now, quickly, I wanted to share histories that have futures. This is an important theme that I have actually gleaned from our tribal historic preservation officer, and a book that she wrote, Histories That Have Futures. Well, North Brookfield Junior and Senior High School sits on land that has been Nipmuc territory since time immemorial. Our gathering today on Zoom is not happening in a historic silo. It's not happening on itself. It's rather a continuation of our shared history. If you quickly look up North Brookfield's history, you can find that it was first settled in 1664. Now, bear with me. I know that sometimes history isn't always exciting. The dates can be a little, too much. But before North Brookfield existed, it was part of Brookfield. Then it broke off into all its respective towns and directions. It says it was settled, right, in the 1600s. Before it was called Brookfield, that's an English word. Before it was called Brookfield, it was Quabog Plantation, and that was an English town. And that is what we know of today as New Braintree, Brookfield, West Brookfield, North Brookfield, East Brookfield, and Warren. And eventually, this plantation, this area, it broke off into these individual towns and became the areas that you may be familiar with today. But you see, this English town back in the 1600s was most likely named after the river that flows through that area, Quabog River. That was native territory, my ancestors' territory. Now, colonization, it led to a war. Not everyone knows about it. I'm very certain all of the native people joining us today know about it. King Philip's War, or Metacom's Rebellion. Two different words to describe the same thing. Now, I won't get into too many details, but you should know that this was the bloodiest war on US soil per capita in our history. Set precedents for many different native relations. The context is very hard to stomach, but I need you to understand the context that I think about when I think about talking to people from Brookfield as a Nipmuc person. Now, Brookfield is the area of Wheeler's Surprise, and also the Siege of Brookfield. Now, these are very English ways to describe these events in history. I could easily also describe them as Muddawamp's successes. Muddawamp was a Nipmuc chief, and he led successful battles in your area. But when I look up the history on Brookfield, I read it from that English perspective that makes me feel so disrespected, like I'm not human. Now, war is not an easy thing to read or write or just even engage with when you're learning about it. But my point is, we have these histories that are so deeply entangled. And Mudawamp, to me, if anything, is someone who fought so that one day Brittany, I could be born. All right, and now that I'm here, 345 years after King Philip's War, I'm coming to the people of your town. And I am echoing a 345-year-old message. I'm asking you to respect my culture. In 2020, today, mascots are a barrier between us. And as I stated, they hurt all of us. They don't just hurt Native people, they hurt non-Native people too. They're not educationally sound. Now, over 345 years, the message that I have to deliver to you has definitely had to adapt and change. So if after everything that I've said hasn't touched you in any way so far, then let me at least say that I believe this is an opportunity to search for a common goal that we can all reach together. If you want to honor Indigenous peoples, reach out to us. We're right here. I'm right here. I'm still alive. And there's many more of us right here on this panel with you. Reach out to Native people and ask how you can address our current problems. If you want to remember Indigenous history, teach it. Teach all of it. And you guys have a very, very, very intriguing, albeit very sad, history with Native people. Teach it. If you want to support Native people, contact Native people and see what can be done. Now, there are many efforts going on to correct these injustices, and there's countless of ways to move forward in a good way. So not to be dramatic, but to be quite matter-of-factly, and to be frank, after 345 years of strife amongst us, let's do this together and make a positive change together. Let's kick it off with this. Kadabaramish Tabatne. Thank you.
Thanks, Brittany. Thank you, all of you who spoke. And again, thank you. I know this is a very short time frame when we asked you to come and speak, and we really, really appreciate it. The next section of the meeting is we do have a number of students and residents who registered to speak, and we're going to give them their time. The first one on my list is Tashina Holmes.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, we did ask our people who registered to speak to limit themselves to 3 minutes. So if you want to go ahead, Tashina.
Hi, I'm Tashina. I've lived in town for 25 years. I am also Mi'kmaq. I have a family up in Canada on the Eel Bar Reservation. I went to North Brookfield Elementary School and high school, and I have personally experienced a lot of discrimination and stereotyping, even directly related to the mascot. I have children in school now, and my mother also went to school here. We have all experienced discrimination and negative stereotypes, not just due to the mascot, but due to the lack of accurate teaching of our history. I ask that you please change this mascot, if not for the sake of, me and my generation, but for the sake of my children. They already have had to argue with their teachers over accurate representation of them in history, and they're only in 3rd and 6th grade. There's a few things I was going to say too, but I'm so glad that and I really appreciate the panel of Indigenous people who were able to come and speak up today. They really saved me from trying to cram 1,000 words into 3 minutes. As one of the I know there's very few Indigenous people who actually live in North Brookfield. I can tell you that this has hurt me and my family and my children very deeply. And in no way have I ever seen anything honored by this mascot to my people. And I am one of the unlucky people who, at the time this mascot was put up, my ancestors, my grandmother, and her mother were not allowed to dance their dances or sing their songs or wear their cultural apparel. So it's insulting and heartbreaking to see the mascot, knowing that when this was put up, my people were not allowed to dress in those ways and dance in their ways, yet white people were allowed to make up their own ideas and pretend that they were Indigenous people, while the real Indigenous people were not allowed to even speak their own language. If you really want to honor us, put the mascot to rest, change Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day, and talk about our culture and our history.
Thanks, Tashina. Next we have Lori DePel.
I can't find her on the list. She may be listed differently.
Lori, if you're on here, can you click the raise hand button? We can find you if you're under a different screen name. Let's see any hands being raised.
Okay.
Okay, well, if Lori shows up, we come back to her, but next on our list, Fitzgerald Pucci.
Wait,
Is that her? Did she come up?
Someone's raising their hand.
Okay.
He's waving his hand.
Oh, okay. Yep, okay. So it's yeah, it must be her husband, Mr. DePel.
He's muted though.
I guess you
Thank
are
you.
mute.
No, I appreciate that. Lori, unfortunately, she has to prepare for an emergency order in court tomorrow morning, so she wasn't able to attend tonight, so I apologize.
Okay, that's fine. Next is Fitzgerald Pucci.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for putting this all together. Thank you so much to the Indigenous voices and leaders that came to have this conversation with us tonight. I'm really grateful for y'all. So I have just a couple of words, and I come from the perspective of, I really think that we can transition into something that we can grow into together as a community that we can be really proud of. People of North Brookfield and Indigenous folks visiting us, I come to you to discuss the symbol that our best and brightest young folks in town represent. My cousins, who live in town and who I love dearly, have worn the uniforms of their sports teams with pride as they've competed with other young stars across the state as North Brookfield's representatives. The symbol that's represented the town for decades is like a uniform which we have outgrown. It's a couple of sizes too small for us now. I want you to picture if one of our children were to be at one of their games or their rallies in an ill-fitting uniform, their motion restricted, their appearance undignified. They can't represent our town to its best with an ill-fitting uniform. Ladies and gentlemen, we have outgrown the mascot representing our community. Let us find something new together, something that fits our children and our community at its very best. I come today not to take something that has been held dear by alumni, even if they were unintentional about this. And I do not come to scold the townspeople for that same connection. I've come here in the hopes that we can find a solution together to put our young ones in the best position they can be in to achieve their fullest potential. Let's find a symbol that makes our town's uniform fit together. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Pucci. Next, we have Zach Calgagny. Hopefully I pronounced that one right.
Again, I don't see Zach on here. If he's under another name, if you could raise your hand, it's by hitting the more button next to your name. It's raise your hand feature, I think. Zach, going once.
Well, Zach, if you're there and you didn't get to unmute quick enough, just let us know and we'll come back to you. Next, we have Sophia Hassenfuss.
Sophia is here.
Hi, I first want to thank the school committee for holding this meeting, and I want to acknowledge that this is a very difficult, painful topic for many people. I want to thank the Indigenous panelists who joined us and thoughtfully took time to educate and share knowledge with us. My name is Sophia Hassenfuss. I'm currently on the traditional unceded territory of the Wampanoag Nation. I graduated from North Brookfield High School in 1999. I have deep regrets about not bringing up the mascot issue back when I was in high school. I know this is a long-standing concern and that there's been a debate about it in previous years. I know that people are worried now is not the time, our country's too divisive, but it's my hope that we can see why now is exactly the right time. So as you heard in this panel, in 2016, the Nipmuc Tribal Council wrote a letter with unanimous support asking that Massachusetts schools retire all American Indian mascots. Reasons were thoughtfully explained. They updated the letter in July of 2020, again explaining their position. Mascots like these perpetuate negative stereotypes of Indigenous people. They promote cultural appropriation, simplify complex history, promote misunderstanding of Indigenous heritage, and reduce entire cultures into a generic symbol. It's my sincere belief that's our job as white people in this country to grapple with the history of racism without requiring Indigenous or other people of color to do the extra work of explaining the problems repeatedly to us, though we are grateful. In the last school committee meeting on this topic, there were a lot of concern about the costs and also mention of the possibility of North Brookfield becoming regionalized, that the mascot won't need to be addressed at all. There were people on that Zoom who offered to help with fundraisers to mitigate some of these concerns. I don't think anyone would expect the uniforms are going to be replaced tomorrow. There's a process for making a change, and we can think about that. The more important focus that we should be focused on now is the behavior we're modeling to the children, young adults that go to North Brookfield schools, a place of learning, a place to expand knowledge. Learning about cultures can be a part of that. I went to North Brookfield schools. The mascot was there this entire time I was there. And there was never once a thoughtful conversation about Indigenous cultures. We didn't have conversations about the complex history of Native Americans. We didn't have conversations about Native stereotypes, or that Indigenous people are a living, breathing part of the community today. So if we wait until we're forced to change the mascot due to Massachusetts state legislator, or wait to see if we're regionalized as a school, it's a major missed opportunity to use this as a learning moment about the positive impacts of making important changes, how growth should be part of our lives forever. I'm aware that there's a petition going around that says North Brookfield students are quote unquote proud and honored to play for the quote Indians, but there's no negativity, and honor and respect is why the kids quote unquote play their hearts out. I understand the purpose of a mascot to be creating unity, connection, and a collective feeling of pride. In order to honor and respect a group of people, I would personally honor and respect their wishes. As we know, the National Congress of American Indians launched a campaign in the 60s asking that Indigenous stereotypes be removed from print and media. That is nearly 60 years of their requests not being respected or honored. The change.org petition could be signed by anyone from anywhere. The signatures aren't listed on the petition. It's my hope that the petition that we initially sent to the school committee will hold a little more weight, since nearly every single one of those almost 100 signatures is from a North Brookfield alum or North Brookfield resident. Right now, as we know, it's a unique moment in US history. A small space is opened up to have tough conversations about race and racism. It's crucial moving forward that we have these conversations. That we recognize the influence of stereotypes that's been proven to have negative mental health impacts. Mascots directly result in lower self-esteem, increased stress, increased depression amongst Indigenous youth and young adults, and also increased negative attitudes towards Indigenous people by non-Native Americans. Other Massachusetts towns have recently changed their outdated mascots, from Grafton, Bolton, Turner Falls, Hanover, Winchester. Other changes took place many years ago when UMass became the Minutemen way back in 1972, or Deerfield retired their mascot in 2000. It would be embarrassing if North Brookfield is one of the last, and a missed learning opportunity if it was because we were forced rather than if we came together to make the decision as a community. We have the opportunity to set a precedent for standing on the correct side of history, do the right thing now. Not an easy change to retire a mascot that people love, but it should be the easy choice. And I think there are plenty of things that can unify this close-knit community in North Brookfield.
Thanks, Sophia.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Samantha Laney.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, my name is Samantha Laney. I am not of Native descent, but I am from North Brookfield, not currently there now, but I lived in that small town for 18 years. So I do deeply understand the importance and the place that tradition holds in this community. Sorry, my cat is coming on my screen. Pride in your high school mascot and where you came from is a pillar of life in this neck of the woods, which is the very reason why we need to change this mascot. As a people who value tradition and the way that we do, we should be able to empathize with a group of people whose tradition and culture has been under attack. And we've heard tonight from Indigenous people that they have had their culture stripped from them for hundreds of years. So it seems to me like honoring their singular request to change the mascot is the least that we can do. Native Americans are still here and across the country are suffering largely due to our country's refusal to honor the treaties made with them. Not to mention that there are people in this very community who we heard from tonight who are harmed by this mascot. It might not seem like a big deal to you, but to have your culture, your traditions, and your likeness boiled down to a two-dimensional icon and placed amongst other mascots who are more often than not animals is degrading, even if you don't think it is. Imagine if the school's mascot were white guys. That feels ridiculous, and that's because it is. And although it is not the equivalent because of the lack of historical trauma in that example, it just highlights the idea that mascots should not be groups of people, especially when those groups of people have made it very clear that they do not support the use of their name in this way. It is impossible to make the argument that this mascot is not offensive. Indigenous people here tonight and across the country have made their feelings clear. You do not have to understand, you don't even have to like it, but you do need to recognize the damage that this mascot does. I truly don't understand why, after someone has told you something is hurting them, why you would keep doing it. Maybe it's the money for the change, but the principle is more important than the actual iconography. Maybe it's the inconvenience, but frankly, adjusting your thinking comes second. A promise to change needs to come now. Now, I'm gonna level with you. This mascot will change. Whether you like it or not, whether it be at this meeting tonight or 10 years down the road, the mascot's going to change. Mascots like this have been changed across the country and across the state here. And as someone pointed out, it would be pretty embarrassing if we were the last ones to hop on the wagon. Change is scary and sometimes inconvenient and sometimes upsetting, but it's happening. So what realistically is going to happen is this is not a meeting about whether or not this mascot changes. This is a meeting about what side of history you would like to be on. Thank you.
Thanks, Samantha. And I think the last person we have who signed up to speak was Karen Lee Miller.
Karen is here.
I'm just unmuting myself. Okay. Hi, my name is Karen Lee Miller. I want to offer a deep appreciation to our visitors for the energy and the emotions that it must take to show up time and time again. And I could only imagine how it feels to be fighting this fight over and over and over. I moved to Ayr Street in North Brookfield at the age of 1. I'm a proud alumna of North Brookfield High School. This town has always been home to me and I care about it deeply. I'm proud of North Brookfield and I feel that it was an idyllic place to grow up in a lot of ways. I did not understand then that our mascot name represents a long and sad history. I was active in the school's theater, student government, and sports. I marched in parades and I cheered on my fellow Indians at sporting events. But I did not know the harm I was doing. Now I know better and I can do better. The name Indian and the corresponding mascot image does not represent the awesome history and culture of North Brookfield. I'm sure many of us have learned that history from our incredible high school teacher, Mr. Kai. May he rest in peace. We cannot go back in time, but as we try to educate the future generations, we need them to understand that a people's culture is their own. It's not something to be taken and used by others. I want to listen to the local Indigenous tribes who have requested this name change. I went to college at Stonehill College. They used to be the Chieftains. They're now the Skyhawks. I used to work at Amherst College. They were the Lord Jeffs, who actually was a man who knowingly and intentionally spread disease among Indigenous peoples. They are now the Mammoths. I studied education for many years and I now work as an educator. I know the factors that enhance and also inhibit student development and learning. This is well studied. Racial stereotypes are harmful. The current mascot reinforces those racial stereotypes. They generate a hostile learning environment and have documented harmful impacts. There are many things to be proud of and to celebrate in North Brookfield. We can get creative and respect and honor our community, ourselves, and Indigenous people by changing the mascot. I believe it's time, and it's not about being politically correct for me. It's about teaching our children how to respect and honor other cultures, and it's about basic decency and doing what's right. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. So thank you to the people who registered to speak this evening. We also received a lot of written comments, and all the school committee members have copies of those comments, as well as the petition, the change.org petition that was forwarded to us. We won't be voting this evening. We'll be voting in December at our December meeting. But I do want to take the time again to thank the people from the Mascot Coalition again for coming in such short notice. Appreciate you speaking to us. And also to all the people that have tuned in to listen. We do have our rest of our school committee meeting left. So please stick around if you're interested. You can learn more about the day-to-day happenings of the school. However, if you would like to sign off, we won't be offended. So, thank you again, everyone, very much. Appreciate all the thoughts and lots of for us to think about.
Thank you very much for your coming on here.
All right, where are we? Okay, so woo, on to financial reports. And actually, if I can just, and I know you guys know what I'm gonna say, if we can just highlights. All right, good. Great.
So financial reports, I would report that are very much similar to previous months. I know that some of the reports are not exactly indicative of where some of the accounts stand. The town does have a new town accountant, and just getting up to speed to understand, how all the systems work has taken a little bit of time. So Mrs. LeBlanc is working with her on her end for the school line items. And so some of the information that's in your packet in terms of the reports that we submit every month isn't as accurate as we would like it. And certainly we're moving in that direction, but nothing major to point out in terms of the reports, other than to say at the end of page, the account, page 4 of in your packet, you can see that there's a discrepancy. There's an $11.40 discrepancy, and this is part of that process of working out the kinks in working with someone new to figure out where everything comes and goes. And so there's been some challenge with that. There's also some notes on the grant revolving in red along the right-hand side, needing to reconcile certain accounts because some bills were paid out of accounts that weren't intended for. And again, that's kind of some of the growing pains of having a new accountant working in such an environment. So Mrs. LeBlanc has not been able to do a complete sort of review and balancing of her accounts. But to this point, what she's been able to figure is that we're very much on track. We're not spending into the red. But again, just some frustration from her end to be able to provide you very accurate reports, which she has for a very long time.
Yes, we know that it will bother Mrs. LeBlanc, and we understand it's a new situation, and we know she'll work it out.
So in terms of other financial news, just kind of updating the committee and the community, the Municipal CARES Act Round 2. Again, the CARES Act was an overarching federal legislation to provide relief in the wake of the pandemic. And the town, in addition to the school district, has applied for funding. And part of the town application could include some school funding. And in Round 2, the town did reach out to us, and we submitted some expenditures and some potential expenditures, and that included some fairly significant dollars, a little over $77,000 to look at our HVAC system, to upgrade that, to include either a UV light system or an air purifying system. These are big expenses in the sort of the bowels of the HVAC system. Kind of if you have a home air purifier for a room, think of that on a massive scale for a building. And suffice it to say, it would be 2 buildings. So we are pursuing that. We also received funding to make our food services, which we discussed at the last meeting, the deficit that we were running, a little bit more palatable, although not complete. The CARES Act funding ends on December 30th, 2020. So this coming December 30th is when the cutoff is. So we were able to submit the losses of the food services department through that period of time. So we received $37,500 for that. We're also installing going to be installing a second outdoor classroom space. One of the key recommendations was to learn outside when possible. So we're currently in the perhaps this week, going to have one outdoor classroom space installed over by the junior senior high school out behind where the cafeteria is. We were able through this funding to purchase a second one, which will be here at the elementary school. And we're looking at over where the planting beds are, over behind kind of the kindergarten preschool hallway, overlooking the soccer fields.
Good thing someone cleared those out.
I was just gonna say, you're not gonna pull those out, are you?
We had some free labor to help with that. And then lastly, we have some additional needs to support students with special education needs, with some services to make up for many of the services that some of those students, may have not have gotten beginning last March when we had to leave. So this is great news to really support some of the expenses that we've had or will have moving forward.
Can you just really succinctly explain the issue with the food services again, where we are, we have a grant from the federal government so that our meals are free for
Sure.
all students, but we run a deficit because.
Yeah, so the federal government will reimburse us for every meal purchased. And I use the word purchased, meaning any student that wants a meal when they're here gets a free meal. They don't have to pay for it. They'll reimburse us for that meal. Unfortunately, we only have half the kids here on 4 days and no kids here for 1 day. So the number of meals being, again, purchased is way down. And when we're only getting that reimbursement, and that food services program is supposed to be self-sustaining. It is not budgeted by the school committee through the town. It is supported by sales and reimbursements from the federal government in this case. So paying salaries, buying food, doing all that work in the food services department needs to be funded by their sales, and the sales are significantly lower than they have typically been when we are all in school all day, every day. So
Did they increase at all after our last meeting?
it has increased, and we're continuing to look at different ways to support, to make sure people know, first of all, and Maria and Tim did a fabulous job in the last meeting.
Well, I'm just thinking we need to go out there and start promoting again too.
Right, but also I think if there was a way to make it easier to access food, that would help too. And I know that you and the food service staff are talking about ways of doing that, so.
Yeah, so like here at the elementary school, for example, we're doing breakfast in the classroom. So typically kids who came in and wanted breakfast went to the cafeteria and they ate there. However, we've kind of brought the food to the kids so that as they arrive, they show up to their classroom. There's a place where they can, sort of a kiosk kind of approach, get breakfast and go into their classroom where they can get ready for the day. And we're seeing higher participation, which is fabulous. Kids having breakfast, ready for a day of learning. At the junior senior high, we're running a contest just to get kids to eat breakfast. Many of our junior senior high kids don't eat breakfast in the morning. Either they're in a hurry or they're tired or they just don't eat breakfast. But when we offer it, they do. And that's fabulous. So yeah, we've sustained significant losses because we're just not selling as many meals.
Okay.
And we're only being reimbursed for the small number that we actually are doing.
Okay.
As of last month, and I did not check prior to this meeting, I should have, but we were usually selling between breakfast and lunch about 500 meals a day. We were doing less than 90 at the time of our last school committee.
Okay.
So that's where the loss is, even though it's free for everyone.
All right. So just a reminder that the food is free for everyone, and if you are a remote student, you can register for it. And if you're on remote days, you can register for it. You do have to still come and pick it up, but
I've been told the pickup process is very smooth and easy.
it is actually. And it is not limited to students of North Brookfield schools. It is open to all children.
Under 18.
All children under 18. So that is also something to consider. All right, so,
Want me to move on?
yeah, sorry,
So, That's okay. So my superintendent's report, I'll have this regular reopening update. I've provided some of this in the past, but we again met with the Board of Health, the administrative team, our nurses, and this month, Mrs. Tucker joined us. Again, the purpose is to work with our local Board of Health, given the pandemic, given transmission and the surge and all those things. We're trying to be as prepared as we can. And in those meetings, we tend to run scenarios. What do we do if kinds of things? And they have been so helpful to work with Trevor Brusso, Ethan Millard, the administrative team, Mrs. Floyd, Mrs. Zapula, our school nurses, to just, and this month, Mrs. Tucker, to just sort of go through and say, what happens if we have a staff member, a student, someone in the community, transmission of the virus? How do we react? So we're going to continue to do those things. We're learning every day. This is a challenging issue, as you know. We've received our first shipment of MERV 13 filters, which is fabulous. I know we've been waiting, so as the rest of the world. We're still waiting for more, but we at least got one shipment. Recently, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education sent out a survey of remote learning practices. There is a tremendous amount of pressure at the state level from a variety of groups on getting kids back in school full time and the harm of being out of school. And remote learning doesn't equal in-person learning. And we all know that. And so they were trying to get a sense, because so many districts are doing their own thing, what it looks like. And they did ask us to provide what we're doing on remote days. And again, I don't know what they're going to do with that. They may look at what we're doing and say, this is great and everything will be okay. And we just move on until, hopefully we can get back in school sooner. And they might look at it and say, you're not doing enough. And if that's the case, then we'll have to reconvene and look at what we're doing remotely to try to support kids. So, to that end, I did hear from a number of community members asking about the governor's speech last week, a press conference where he encouraged getting back in school to full time. I would remind people the governor also said, per the protocols, and the protocols that we established with our reentry task force was to maintain the CDC recommended 6 feet of physical distancing. That was supported by surveys of parents, teachers, community members, and we developed our plan based on that. And without additional space and additional staffing, which unfortunately there is no money or space to do that to have double the number of teachers and double the number of classrooms. That's the only way we could get back in full time, and keep 6 feet of physical distancing. And I would remind people, the physical distancing, the mask, hand washing and hand sanitizing, those are the things that are keeping our schools relatively, knock on wood, safe at this point from the virus. And so I too want kids back here every day. I want every kid back here every day. I wish we could, but at this point, we really cannot without going to less than 6 feet. And that was not the will of parents and guardians. Our reentry task force saw that quite clearly in the survey data we got, and the CDC certainly recommends 6 feet. So we'll find out more about the remote learning data collection piece. We just finished Q1. Friday, November 13th was the end of Q1. Today was the first day of Q2. And to that end, we've had some comings and goings from the different cohorts at both schools. So we've made those changes. We are, the next time we'll do a change is between Q2 and Q3, which is January 29th. So, we'll continue to work hard to support kids in the cohort and the model that they're learning in. I think all of our staff are doing that now. And then last kind of thing from the state level is the DPH color-coded system did get an overhaul, and there are a lot less communities in red now, given their new, the way they define it. What they did, they made some really good changes, and they made some changes that I get a little nervous about, but the good changes are they really looked at communities based on their size. Because comparing North Brookfield to Worcester in the old system wasn't really a fair comparison in terms of the type of community, the number of people in the community, et cetera. So the new system does take that into account. However, I think to move from, I forget the number, 100 and whatever, I think it was 115 last I saw, it might have been more, communities in the red to 15 seemed like a little scary to me given where we are right now in the virus and its trajectory. So more on that as we go along, but please follow the DPH website, mass.gov COVID for that. You can see where communities are.
But of course, that is just guidance from the state, and decisions are going to be made by, at the local level. So, with the Board of Health, the superintendent, and the school committee if we have to. And so it's, that's just guidance. It's not how the decision is made.
Absolutely.
And in most cases, it's made over
Yep.
3-week
Several
weighted
weeks.
average or 7-day weighted average. It's not a day-to-day thing unless there's an actual
kind of outbreak.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Great points.
So, sorry, just finish up there.
So my last thing was just that goes along with this. One of the things that they're really recommending is the flu shot for people this year. They think it would be really helpful to that end. The North Brookfield Board of Health is working in partnership with us to have a flu clinic on Thursday evening from 4 to 6 p.m. It's a free clinic at the North Brookfield Junior Senior High. You park in the main parking lot, come in the front door, go down the stairs in front of you, and there'll be people there to direct you. Anyone over the age of 5, kids who have had the flu shot before, that was made clear that please don't bring your child if it's the first time they've ever had their flu shot. People do have reactions to it, and they don't want a first-time child to have an adverse reaction there. They'd rather them work with their pediatrician, doctors. But anybody 5 and over who has had a flu shot, any adult, whether they've had a flu shot or not, can come. We ask that you bring your insurance card with you. The public health nurse, our school nurses, we have some student volunteers, some administrators that'll be there supporting this effort.
Bring your insurance card, bring a mask.
Please wear a mask. Yes, you have to wear a mask to enter the premises. So it's really important. And we think this is a great opportunity to, again, support the folks in our community.
Yeah, the Board of Health actually did a call out this afternoon. And before we move on, Elizabeth and Debbie, I didn't forget about you. Did you have any comments or questions or anything about what we've talked about?
No.
We're going to keep you on mute and ask you questions.
Debbie said no. She shook her head. I don't see Elizabeth's a little further down. I gotta click on.
No, I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for checking in, Maria. But I'm all set. No questions here.
Okay. So the snow day plan is next, I think, right?
Yeah, so one of the things that the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education had gave us the option of this year, school districts the option of, is having remote learning days in the event of having to cancel in-person days due to weather. Because the systems are there to provide remote instruction, that they wanted to give us this option this year. There's a couple of caveats. One, you cannot have a remote learning day if there's significant power outages around town. So several weeks ago, we had significant power outages. That day needs to be made up. You can't call that a remote learning day and move on because people couldn't log into video conferencing because of the power outages. A couple of other criteria, we have to take attendance. So if we're going to have a remote learning day, kids are going to be expected to log on per the schedules in the plans that we'll send out. There'll be a schedule that says at 8:30 this happens, 9 o'clock this happens, and kids have to log into video conferencing classes with their teachers, and teachers will be taking attendance. If students aren't there, they're marked absent for the day. So that's one. Second, we have to do synchronous instruction. That means there has to be live instruction. Teachers have to be on Zoom or Google Meet, video conferencing platform, and have a lesson, a live lesson. And lastly, there has to be some evidence of work product. And that's not a student's problem or a parent's problem. That's an educator problem. Educators need to be able to sort of produce student learning in some way. So, we met as two separate teams, our reentry task force from the junior senior high, our reentry task force from the subcommittees from the elementary school and the junior senior high got together and put together plans to allow this to happen, and develop schedules that will have kids logging in, meeting with their teachers per their schedule, per a schedule. And they'll be providing instruction, having kids do some asynchronous work, because it wouldn't be a good thing to log in and have kids on Zoom or Google Meet for 6.5 hours, saying nothing about educators being on there that long. That's just too long to be on video conferencing. But thinking more in lines of short kind of mini lessons, call it, say, 20-minute lesson on, I don't know, how to solve for X. And then kids would log off and be able to practice that after learning about it. And then they'll go to their next class, maybe, 30 minutes later. Log on for a short lesson, maybe this one's 15 minutes. And they read an article and have some brief discussions, and then they have to write a response to it. But they would do that offline. So the idea is to mix in synchronous, live with the teacher time, and time off the computer where they're just doing work associated with the lesson they had. So that's kind of how we built the schedule.
And this is just if, say for instance, my daughter's in cohort B, if there is a snow, she's home on Monday, Tuesday. If there's a snow day on Tuesday, it's not going to affect her. She's still doing what she ordinarily would do, the work that the teachers assign them. But if there was a snow day on Thursday when she is in school, then she would be doing this remote day.
Exactly.
Teaching.
The idea is
Learning.
kids who are supposed to be in school that day would have synchronous time, online time with their live time with their teachers. The goal is to keep instruction going. Kids have had a lot of obviously interruptions to their education, and we're hoping to keep things moving forward.
Is this ready to go? Like, is it snowed tomorrow?
This is ready to go.
Okay.
So the teams have developed it. And what we would do is, if there's a snow day in using Maria's example on Thursday, and it's not supposed to snow, everybody, and I made the call to cancel school for the day, it would be, I would say, cancel in-person learning, but cohort B will have a remote learning day, and teachers will get that message and send out links. If there's significant power, I will say school is canceled. There'll be no remote learning today, and that's a day we will have to make up. So it's a tool. It's not something we have to use, depending on the situation. But I think the idea of education anytime is moving closer and closer as the technology improves and increases. So I think this is just a way to keep things moving forward, and I'm pretty excited about it. The fact is that, you know, we have some things in place to be able to do this. And I know Blizzard bags was a couple of years ago, and those were kind of outlawed by DESE because they wasn't really instruction. It was just busy work. This the way we set it up, I hope, is not busy work. It's instruction, and it will keep things moving forward from what they learned yesterday or the last time they were with their teacher.
Any comments or questions on that, Elizabeth, or any the other couple things you covered? No? Okay.
And then lastly, we had some communication with World Strides. That's the company that we worked with to send our kids to Washington, D.C. But unfortunately, we had the pandemic, and the trip was canceled, if you remember, last spring. And,
we remember.
yeah. And so the plan was to go this year in April. And at the time, we were assuming this is going to end. And unfortunately, the way, again, the things have gone, it doesn't look like April may be a possibility. In fact, at this point, we are not doing any field trips anywhere. So Mrs. Powers has had some communication with World Strides, the company. Ms. Powers, you want to jump in and talk a little bit about what they suggested?
Yeah. So they're looking to suggest moving the trip to spring of 2022. So for the students who are current ninth graders, be in their 10th grade year. The current eighth grade class, we had a preliminary approval for their trip in our March meeting of 2019. So they would also move their trip from this spring to 2022. There has been some initial conversation with our current seventh graders about a possible trip in their eighth grade year, which would be spring of 2022. So the company has been working with many districts to create a no risk guarantee if they sign up by December 15th of this year for a trip of spring 2022. Knowing that if there's any particular reason that the trip needs to be canceled, people will get almost all of their money back if we cancel by a certain time. So I'm kind of just looking to see if there are any insights or thoughts about pushing the trip to the spring of 2022.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, if yeah, I mean, the opportunity to do that is a wonderful opportunity, and I would hate for the kids to miss out. So if that's something that can be arranged, and I mean, our 3 grades would probably be equivalent to the size of another school's 1 grade. So yeah, would be fine. I think that's great. Anybody else? Any negative thoughts or?
No, if there's a time limit on the deposits, I think that gives you a better buffer. to
Yeah.
figure out which way the wind is
Right.
blowing, so they're not-
Exactly.
Yep.
Yep.
That's good. No risk too.
Okay, we'll move forward with that.
All right. Mrs. Powers, again, with your.
All right, so just to kind of touch on some highlights, we have started our What I Need Now block, which is what we call our WIN block, which is about intervention and extension for students. So teachers are working to pull students individually to work with them during our WIN block, which is about 25 minutes in the middle of the day. It's been so far great feedback about the use of this time. And then I want to just highlight our Rise and Connect programs at the junior senior high school. They've been taking on some specific projects lately. So as you may recall, the Rise program has always done the cafe for our faculty and staff and haven't been able to do that. But they are taking on the organization of our food pantry and doing an amazing job, as well as the t-shirt. They're really rolling with the t-shirt program. And also our Connect students are beginning a woodworking component into their curriculum. So just super excited about some of the programs that are coming out of those two spaces.
So are they actively taking t-shirt orders?
So we're doing we're getting all the students really trained
Okay.
in the process.
Mhm.
They're gonna do a fundraiser themselves. And then once they kind of pass that test, they'll start opening it up for orders.
Okay, awesome.
That was on my report also.
Okay.
It needs to be highlighted. Thank you.
Yeah, of
Jamie,
course.
and thank you, Rich.
Anytime you want to, share pictures on Facebook, that's always a good way to spread the word. Mrs. Priestley?
Hi. So we have been doing some really fun things. We did our Not So Spooky Read Aloud, as you can see in your update. We weren't able to host an on-site Not So Spooky Read Aloud event, but we did do kind of a Bitmoji pumpkin patch, which featured some read alouds and crafts that staff had filmed of themselves, and there were some sing-along videos. And I hope that the families of North Brookfield Elementary School had a lot of fun participating in those. I do want to just highlight my last thing, the PBIS Academy, which our adjustment counselor, Mrs. Klein, applied through DESE to have this opportunity. And what we thought was going to be a one-year opportunity turned into a 3-year opportunity. So we're really excited to get this training for our PBIS team that we can then bring to our staff at large and really make our PBIS program the best that it can be.
That's awesome.
Very excited to give you more updates on that.
Cool. And thank you to the staff for the virtual Not So Spooky Read Aloud. It was cool, and it's also great that just try and keep the tradition going.
Yeah, it was really, really cool. And of course, the Veterans Day.
Yep, that was awesome
The
too.
letter
Yep.
the kids wrote was so sweet. And PTO, thank you to PTO for picking those up and mailing those out, because that was, not being able to have the Veterans Day breakfast, which is such an awesome event. We just really were grateful to the PTO for making that,
Yeah.
honoring that holiday and making it
Yep.
official.
Yeah. Elizabeth, Debbie, any questions, comments? No? Okay. Mark?
Yeah, I'm just gonna highlight something I'm really proud of. Last year, you may have recalled, I talked a couple of times about state coming in and doing the tiered monitor review. So we had one in both for special education and also for our English language program. For special education, we had only two minor findings. And I've been through these reviews a number of times when I was at Fitchburg. Never had a review go as smoothly as this one. So I was very, very proud of it. Says a lot of what I inherited there, quite frankly, too. So
great.
Was very, very happy with that. We got a little work to do in the English language learning area, but for special education, we did real well. And very, very complimentary from the department.
Well, that's good to hear.
So I will just jump in and say kudos to Mark and Melody, his right hand, because those are like going to the dentist for a root canal. They're not very fun or comfortable. They're often, sometimes can even feel accusatory. And I know the DESE folks don't mean it to come off that way, but I too have been through a number of these and have two minor findings that I think we probably addressed before the report actually came out. Is just fantastic from special education. And in Mark's defense for the English language program, I think we had one student in that program in the time that I've been here in 4 years. And so, low incidence districts like ours struggle with some of the things that the state expects. Now we're gonna make it right and we're gonna fix it, and he's doing a fabulous job. But some of the challenges that are associated with being such a low incidence district is just we don't have the numbers of kids, so we don't often have to do some of the things, and we've had some transition in Mark's position over the last couple of years, and I think that had something to do with it. And he's come in and he's grabbed the bull by the horns and is doing everything he needs to do, as frustrating as it is sometimes. I was in his office, he was a little frustrated the other day, but he's getting it done. And I appreciate it so much.
Thanks. And back to Ms. Parks for the teaching and learning report.
So just two highlights of some of the work that our teacher leaders are doing in the district. So today was the first meeting of the instructional leadership team for this school year. We kind of put ourselves on hiatus until we got the year underway, and we met today. Just really talked about things that are working well, things that are struggling throughout the district, and then ways we can support the teachers and staff. So it's a really good conversation came out of that. And to kind of piggyback off of what Mrs. Priestley said, the MTSS, so the multi-tiered systems of support team, which is formerly our PBIS team, is working with Mrs. Klein, who's taking the lead on the PBIS Academy. We're also looking at ways to build and support district-wide initiatives around supporting academics, supporting social emotional, as well as behavioral supports in the district. So I'm excited about the work that we'll be doing with that team.
Can I say one quick thing about that, though? We've really come a long ways with the social emotional supports in a very short time. And this has been a very, very tough environment to do so. And I give Jean and Sarah real kudos on leadership in that area.
Well, and I'd like to add to the MTSS piece with the. Oh, goodness. Both schools are implementing WIN blocks, so it looks different at the high school and would naturally, but at the elementary level, we have a 30-minute intervention block scheduled into every grade level, and we're highlighting different models of what intervention looks like in terms of giving students specific academic intervention on specific skills. So really excited about that. Yeah, a lot of good things.
Great, thank you. Before we move on to the facilities report, any questions from the remote members of our committee? No? Okay. Yeah, I just want to say, as always, thanks to the staff and the administrators. I know that this is a really challenging year for you guys, and I appreciate very, very much how hard you all are working, and that the kids are first for all of you, and that is a wonderful thing to be able to say. So real quickly for Mr. Shaw, he points out we already had snow, and he's looking forward to more. I think Mr. Lind already mentioned this, that we received a partial shipment of the new MERV 13 filters, and that the filter company is hoping to fill the second order this week or next week. And that we've been approved for adding the antifreeze to our heating systems in both buildings, so this will be a project of priority. And we've also been approved for adding a UV light technology to the HVAC unit. So that's great to hear that that work is being done. And then Mrs. O'Hara, that for the technology report, that Chromebooks and iPads are being distributed to students in the elementary school that do not have devices. 10 new hotspots arrived and have been activated for families that do not have access to the internet. And she, the E-rate program added an extension so that districts can get additional bandwidth for online instruction. So we were able to file an extension and ask for 1 gigabyte or GBS. No, that's not a gigabyte, whatever. I don't know.
Gig per second.
Yeah, okay. Download. So anyway, basically we're getting more bandwidth or whatever. So that's good. All right.
Policy.
Yep.
The second reading.
Yep. So Tim, you're on the policy committee. Would you like to do the second reading of the, all you got to do is just,
I would love to. Do you have it easily accessible?
well, you don't have to actually read it. You just say we're doing a second reading of that policy.
Oh, okay. We're doing a second reading of the policy IKF graduation requirements.
So next month we will do a third and final reading and we'll vote on it. So if anyone on the committee has any questions or comments, between now and December is the time to bring them up. All right. We don't have any donations. And we've already done the nickname and logo discussion. So I think unless there's other comments from anybody, we are, Debbie, you ready to call for adjournment?
She's at the top of the list, though. I
I don't think you heard.
just clicked her, so.
Now I'm unmuted. God, my husband wishes he had that button. I can't talk. So if we're done, I move that we adjourn.
And a second,
I second.
all in favor? All right,
Passes 4-0.
thanks, everybody, for.
Have a great night, everybody. Thanks for hanging in.
Thank you.
Actually had 20 people hang on to the end.